Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandy NP. Each episode will bring you a new topic or interview related to brain health and wellness as part of my mission to help you on the path to a healthier, happier brain. So, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. My guest today is Alyssa Simpson. Alyssa is a Phoenix-based registered dietitian and certified gastrointestinal nutritionist who is redefining digestive health. Specializing in IBS, SIBO, and other gut challenges, she blends traditional expertise with the latest insights in gut function, such as the critical roles of the gut-brain connection, microbial balance, and lifestyle factors like stress management and sleep quality to uncover the root causes of digestive issues. Her evidence-based approach not only provides natural, sustainable relief, but also empowers clients to enjoy a varied, nourishing diet without prolonged restrictions. Having helped hundreds who struggled with conventional treatments, Alyssa's methods go far beyond quick fixes, offering a comprehensive roadmap for lasting wellness. A passionate educator, she shares her innovative strategies on her podcast, The Gut Health Dialogues, and has been featured in publications like Forbes, Medical News Today, and Everyday Health. Welcome to the show, Alyssa.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. And I was saying before we hit record, we've kind of delved kind of a little bit into the gut-brain connection, but really not ever taken a deep dive. So I'm really excited today to take that deep dive into that connection because it is so important. So for anybody not listening today, you might want to take notes on this one because this is going to be a good conversation. So, but before we get to that part, I always like to ask my listeners just, yes, I read your bio, but can you give us a little bit of story of your background? How'd you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I was always interested in nutrition, so that's where it started. And so I became a dietitian and I did kind of the normal things that you would do initially, which is helping people with weight loss and metabolic issues like diabetes and high cholesterol and high blood pressure and that sort of thing. I had always wanted to start my own private practice though, and when you get into private practice, it becomes, you get away from the insurance model. It becomes more important than ever to really be good at what you do. And I found that to really get good results with people, I had to go beyond a lot of the traditional approaches. So that's kind of what sparked my interest in functional nutrition and gut health, because that's where you can really make a big difference with exploring root causes and how the body systems work together versus just band-aid approaches. So I got in with a group of local gastroenterologists here in Arizona on a contract basis and got my start there in gut health. And it's just kind of been a journey from there. And interestingly enough, I never had any gut issues myself until I started my own private practice. So leaving a steady income, starting my own business while I was learning a brand new specialty was tremendously stressful. And I just remember that feeling of stress in my chest and my throat. And I developed acid reflux. So I was having burning in my throat, sore throat. I had a persistent cough that was keeping me awake at night because every time I fell asleep, I would have to cough and it would wake me up. And the dentist was noticing that my tooth enamel was eroding after just a few months of this. It was crazy. So that caused me to then be in my patient's shoes and use some of the dietary approaches I was using with patients. And I saw that this is no fun to do an elimination diet and have to just avoid the foods that you love and that you've been eating your whole life with no problem. And that is the standard approach. Okay, here, identify your triggers. There you go. And it sucked. And so I was like, this can't be the answer. So now I work with people. Yes, I use elimination diets all the time because for quick relief, it's a wonderful tool, but we don't want to stay there. We want to look at what's out of balance in your gut and address those areas so that you can go back to tolerating foods much more normally. And when we talk about root causes in the context of today's conversation, we can say, okay, your root cause, okay, so let's say the example of acid reflux. I have acid reflux. The standard approach would be we'll take this take this acid reducing medication or maybe stop eating tomato sauce and that sort of thing. Well, but what's causing it? So if we look at the root, so one layer beneath that is, okay, maybe I'm producing too much acid. Actually, we know often we're producing not enough acid. That's a whole other conversation, but we're looking at acid production, enzyme release, stomach emptying speed, and things like that. So that's where we get into functional and integrative. But if we look a layer deeper, like what's at the root below the roots, it's the brain and the gut connection, and it's how stress plays into the brain signaling the gut to do what it's supposed to do. So I think stress, the gut brain connection, the vagus nerve is really at the root of most of the issues that I deal with if we were really to get to the very bottom of it.
So describe that gut brain connection a little bit more for people who may not never have heard that term before, because you and I know what that means, but for the
Mhm.
listeners.
Yeah, it's a two-way connection, and our gut, our brain is connected to our gut by this big, giant superhighway nerve called the vagus nerve. And it's a bidirectional relationship. So our brain sends messaging to the gut. Our gut sends a lot of messaging to the brain too. So it definitely goes both ways. And these are messages about, so the brain will think about when you smell food and your mouth waters. Well, you haven't put any food in your mouth yet. And not only is your mouth watering, your whole digestive tract is starting to water. It's your stomach's producing acid, your pancreas is releasing enzymes, your gallbladder is starting to release bile. So digestion is starting just because you smelled a smell. So that's how powerful the brain is in signaling the digestive tract. And the reverse, an example of that would be that the majority, 80 to 90% of our serotonin is produced in the gut, and the gut is considered the second brain because a lot of complex neurotransmitters are produced there, and the nervous system is very strongly tied to the gut. Um, so and the gut will signal to the brain when you get full, right? That it's time to stop eating, or when you're hungry. So what goes wrong then? Well, our bodies are designed to be resting most of the time, relaxed most of the time. If you think about, you know, ancient civilizations and the whole history of humans on the planet Earth, it's only recently that our modern lifestyles have us moving the way we do, from thing to thing to thing, worrying about the problems of the whole world, which previously we wouldn't have even had access to any problems outside our village or our immediate, circle. And now we have to worry about the whole world, and it's all just brought into us through our TV, and just there's just so much. So we're in a stressful environment that's unnatural, and our bodies are designed in a state of stress to to redirect signaling from our internal organs, including breathing, heart beating, digestion, and direct that signaling and that blood flow. So nervous system signaling and blood flow to our extremities so we can get to safety. Because if we're stressed, that means we're in danger. We need to get to safety. So when we're in this chronic state of stress, to some extent, that signaling is pinched off. And so we're not getting that signaling to the gut. And that can affect things like digestion, as I just explained, motility, so how fast or slow food and waste moves through the digestive tract, the immune system, because 70 to 80% of the immune system is in the gut. So that connection actually modulates, actually helps to control what the immune system is doing in the gut, how well it's protecting you from, it has many functions in the gut, how well it's keeping your microbiome balanced. And so therefore the bacterial balance as well in our microbiome.
So what happens when we take antibiotics, for example, to that microbiome?
Well, yeah, so antibiotics will indiscriminately kill off bacteria. So they're going to, most of them, I mean, so different antibiotics do tend to target, to some extent, some species more than others, but in general, they're not super specific where it's like, I'm just going to target this one pathogen I'm going for and keep everything else safe. We don't have that. hopefully one day we'll get there. But right now, so they will kill off a lot of the good bacteria as well as the bad bacteria. So it's not a concern if you take them once in a while, because sometimes we really do need antibiotics. They're wonderful, life-saving. But you want to keep in mind that there's a downside, and weigh that into your decision to take it. So just be mindful, and maybe especially if you're seeing multiple different doctors for multiple things, are they all keeping track of how many times you've had antibiotics this year? So keep that in mind as well. And what we can see significant gut issues for people who have like lots of antibiotics, maybe recurrent sinus infections, or I see that a lot where you might develop yeast in your gut because yeast can overgrow when we kill off too much of the gut bacteria. So there are risks associated with antibiotics.
Yeah. So then when we get this disbalance in our gut, whether it be from medications that we've used or stress on our body, how does that then affect our brain health since we're on a brain health show? What's that
Yeah.
connection?
Yeah, well, the gut bacteria produce butyrate, which is a short chain fatty acid, and that's very beneficial to our brain cells. So it's a fuel actually for our brain cells. So that would be one of the primary roles that gut bacteria has on our brain function. Um, yeah, and it's all kind of connected our um because it has a strong tie to our neurotransmitter production as well in the gut.
What are some of the bigger problems with brain health that you see when people have digestive issues?
Well, one of the main ones is lots of different brain fog and issues with memory, attention, focus, and that has to do with oftentimes the inflammation that's produced in the gut. So when gut bacteria are out of balance, we get inflammation that goes throughout the bloodstream and can affect our ability to focus. So I think about, especially we mentioned yeast earlier, I think about patients I've had that have had yeast overgrowth, and they can have really significant brain fog. In fact, I have had one patient that had brain fog so bad that she couldn't even focus enough to take her pills and her medication. So it can be really significant depending on the situation. Um, and it all kind of ties back to inflammation. So when we have bacterial overgrowth, which can happen, you mentioned antibiotics, when we kill off our good bacteria, um, then we that causes inflammation. And the intestinal lining is has a single layer of cells actually separating the contents of the intestines from the bloodstream. And when there's inflammation there, there can be gaps in the between the cells. And so contents from the intestine on a microscopic level, so it could be toxins, bacteria, food particles, get into the bloodstream, and they cause inflammation because the immune system says, what is this? This isn't supposed to be here. And so that inflammation travels all throughout the body. So this is what we refer to as leaky gut. Um, and the inflammation travels throughout the body and can affect different areas, but including the brain. So also, gut bacteria produce the serotonin. They also produce dopamine and GABA, which help to regulate mood, motivation, the stress response, and the short chain fatty acids. So butyrate's one of them I mentioned. Those are produced by gut bacteria. So gut bacteria eat fibers in our diet, and they produce these short chain fatty acids. Butyrate's one of them. There's about 12 of them. Acetate, propionate. And these short chain fatty acids, they're kind of like a gift back to us because they fuel the cells lining the digestive tract, and they also help to reduce inflammation in the brain. So when we're not eating enough fiber in our diet, our modern diets are high in sugar and refined carbs, low in fiber. So there's like, when you have a low fiber diet, there's like no food left by the time for the bacteria, by the time all the food gets to the large intestine, you've digested all the quickly absorbed, carbs and then all the fats and protein for the most part in the small intestine. There's very little left for the bacteria. So they're kind of starving. It can actually break down the mucosal layer because they kind of think of like there's a mucus layer in the intestines, and that's where the bacteria are housed. That's where your whole microbiome is housed. And they kind of eat away at it when they don't get enough fiber. It's like they're eating their own house to survive. And that's what can trigger that intestinal permeability. And therefore, they're also not producing the butyrate. So we're not getting that in the brain. It's really an interesting and kind of complex cycle that we see between gut bacteria, intestinal permeability, and the brain, and how these different toxins and inflammation and neurotransmitters play in.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that about the fiber. That is a fascinating fact.
Yeah, yeah. If you think about it, we think about fiber to produce a bowel movement, so we want enough fiber so we don't become constipated because it gives you that bulk, but it's the only food left. Well, that's probably an slight oversimplification, but it's mainly what's left in the stool to feed those bacteria. So you want to think about, as a practical tip I can suggest here for this, because we're talking about gut health and how it affects brain health. We want a diverse microbiome, meaning we want many, many, many different kinds of good bacteria, and we feed those via a diet that's diverse in fibers because different bacteria have different food. And keep in mind, they're very, very small. Bacteria are very small. They don't eat very much. So you don't have to have a large portion of many different plant foods, but little bits here and there of many different plant foods. And you want to start with wherever you're at. So I encourage people to count up their plant foods in a week. You only count each one once. So if you have tomatoes today and tomatoes tomorrow, you count it once for the week. And we want to start with where we're at. So let's say you're at 10 and gradually build up to 30 per week. But it can be really small amounts so that you could eat you know, a grain bar that has seeds in it, and maybe it has 5 different types of whole grain flours and 3 different seeds. Well, that's 8 plant foods right there, because a plant food is vegetables, fruits, seeds, nuts, legumes, and whole grains. So it's not just vegetables. So that makes the 30 number a little bit less intimidating. You could have oatmeal with a tablespoon of a dried fruit medley and a tablespoon of a nut and seed medley, and then you could have like 10 plant foods in one meal. So, but when you understand that that's important to feed a diverse microbiome, it's just as easy to do that if you kind of prep maybe the nuts in a baggie, the fruit in a baggie, as it is to make a bowl of oatmeal with just cinnamon and sugar. But now you understand it's worth it to eat just that little bit of those different plant foods.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on like probiotics? Thinking of like that microbiome and trying to get as many different species in there. There are so many different probiotics out there, some that have a high amount of like one bacteria and some that have multiple. Just what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, so probiotics can have a wonderful effect on our microbiome. But the thing to understand is they're not, I think we used to think that when we take probiotics, we're like repopulating our microbiome. So maybe antibiotics killed off a bunch of bacteria, now we're going to put it back. But probiotics, they're transient, so they're not going to like stay there and set up colonies and live there forever. They're going to go through. So they do have, but because they're beneficial strains as they're passing through our body, they give us many, many benefits. So I definitely think, especially in this context of maybe you have no idea even if you're eating enough plant foods, and you're going to take a week and count it up, and then you're going to have to build gradually, because if you build up too fast, your gut might not like that very much. So you want to take it gradually. And ultimately, the plant foods are what feed a diverse microbiome, um, like in a natural kind of lifestyle, ideally, right? But what's the point of supplements to help fill in gaps that you can't, because we don't always live ideal lives. So ideally, a diet diverse in plant foods would feed a thriving and diverse microbiome, and we really can't, like, we need thousands of different beneficial organisms, or at least hundreds, and we can't put that many strains in a probiotic. Even a really good multi-strain, if you pick it up, you're going to see a dozen or two strains, but you're not going to see hundreds of strains in there. So we have certain probiotic strains that we've tested, we have research on to say that they can help with certain issues. So you asked about different types, and like maybe just a single one or maybe a multi one, and so there's a couple ways to go about picking a probiotic. You can pick it based on a certain strain that's been researched for a certain purpose. So there might we know that, for example, Saccharomyces boulardii helps with diarrhea. So if you're having diarrhea, you might take Saccharomyces boulardii. But or you can just say, well, I don't really know. Maybe you're not doing it for a specific purpose. Maybe you just want overall health and you want to help your gut health. So then you'd want to do maybe a multi-strain where you get a handful of, generally it'll be a lacto-bifido blend, a handful of lactobacillus strains, and a handful of bifidobacterial strains. But basically, as their classic, so you would take a probiotic as you're working on building up your diversity of plant foods, or if there are people that just really have trouble eating a healthy diet, maybe that would be good to take a probiotic. And certain probiotics do have effects on memory. So there are ones researched for mood effects, cognitive effects. So Lactobacillus plantarum and Bifidobacterium breve have been linked to improved memory and learning. Um, so that would be, a place to start if you're looking for that. I know there's another strain, although um, I think it's Bifidobacterium longum has some good research on mood and sleep. So there are definitely strains that can help specifically with brain health if that's what you're looking for.
Awesome. But in general, you'd recommend getting it more from diet. I mean, in an ideal
Well,
world, if we could
yeah.
eat the perfect things, I think that'd be great. But
Yeah, so in general, you want to feed the garden. So think of your microbiome as a garden. You need the soil there, and that's the diet, the fibers and the diet. You want to feed the garden because we can't just take we don't even have all the different organisms in our gut. We haven't found some of them, I'm sure, but we haven't studied them all and put them all in a pill. So we do need to feed the garden, as I would say that's the most important thing. But probiotics certainly have a place, and probiotic foods as well. So probiotic foods can help to, kind of like the probiotic supplements, can help to introduce strains when you're low in certain strains. And I do use probiotics, especially if I do stool testing in my practice for certain people. And if we see that they're low in certain strains, well, I'll give them those strains for a little while. And then we do work on the diet, to get that built up to where we need it to be. And then usually I'll recommend they can go off of it if their diet's looking really good. I'll have patients who are like, I got up to 50 plant foods, and that's great. I don't think you need a probiotic long term if that's the natural. And some people embrace that way of eating. They love it. And if it looks like they're going to keep doing it, that person probably doesn't need a probiotic. But the person who, oh, I don't like a lot of vegetables, I eat on the fly a lot, and, then it would be a good idea for that person.
mhm, mhm. Do you see many people who've fallen into the traps of all the fad diets and all the problems that can come with those?
Yes, for sure. I'm just thinking of some people, I think emotionally, when we want a quick result, we're very susceptible to kind of falling into that. And I do notice that with people. So in the gut health world, people can have a lot of anxiety, and that can either be the chicken or the egg, right? This is a perfect um, context to talk about this because the gut and the brain, are connected, and mood is regulated that way. So, can anxiety trigger gut issues? Yes. Can gut issues cause anxiety? Yes. So it goes both ways. And I noticed that the more anxious people are, even just in general, the more desperate they feel to get a certain result. So, and that could be like people who want to lose weight really quickly. You can get to a point where you're like, I to get this weight off now. And that's the person that's really susceptible to a fad diet, a quick fix. And the problem with fad diets is that the lasting result, I mean, the long-term maintenance of those results is very, very poor. So it'll get you quick results for a short time, but if you really step back and think about it, who cares if you're going to lose weight for a short time if you're going to gain it all back? So, but I think it's an emotional decision. That's what I see when people do that, and it can be kind of hard to talk them down from that in the moment. So sometimes people just have to try it and see if it works for them. But typically we see that cycle
Mhm.
of trying one, it works for a while, you fall off, you try another one, it works for a while, you fall off.
Mhm.
So yeah. So dietitians, we recommend a more moderate approach. We recommend really looking at what are my habits that are causing me to be. So we'll just use weight loss as an example since it's such a common thing that people care about. Um, so what are my habits that are causing me to be overweight and address those. And then also not just look at what you're removing. So we don't just want to look at okay, I'm eating too much of this and that and this. So maybe I snack at night and I'm snacking throughout the day and I'm eating too much sugar. Well, okay, stop that. Well, yes, but what do we replace it with? So we want to build a diet that's fueling your body so you don't have the sugar cravings so it's easier to just stop that, right? Because like we don't just want to go cold turkey and kind of white knuckle it and try to just use willpower because then you're setting yourself up to fail and you'll feel like you just can't do it. Whereas if you eat regular meals, balanced meals throughout the day. You're controlling your blood sugars, you're fueling yourself. It's much easier to not eat those Girl Scout cookies on the counter than when you come home starving because you didn't really eat properly all day. And at that there is a point where it's like no return. You're just gonna eat whatever's in front of you or order whatever looks good because your blood sugars, when they drop, it's like a survival thing that your body's going to tell you to eat.
Mhm.
So we want to have control. We want to take the control back. We want to control our blood sugar so we can make those smart decisions.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's not just about avoiding stuff and no, you shouldn't eat that. It's about building a good diet that's working for you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. If you had your way, what would be your ideal diet that you would recommend that people follow?
So plant-based is a really good way to go, but by that I don't mean vegetarian. So plant-based. And certainly for gut health, which we just talked a lot about that as far as the fiber in plants, but just in general too, because plants have so many healthy chemicals that help protect our cells from damage. So preventing things like cancer, help protect our plants have anti-inflammatory components, which help our heart health and help prevent. I mean, so many of our chronic diseases are inflammatory based, right? So a plant-based diet is an anti-inflammatory diet. So when I say plant-based, that's why, because you want to benefit from all those great um, nutrients in plants, but a little bit of animal protein, I think, is a healthy thing. I know this is like people have different opinions, and I don't try to convince anyone. If somebody comes to me and they want to stay vegetarian, I'm never going to tell that person you have to eat meat. I have not, no, I know some dietitians do. It is possible, like if someone's a vegan, if you're a vegan, you have to be very strategic to make sure you get all your nutrients. So I think there might be certain cases, especially if you have food sensitivities and issues that whittle down your list of allowed foods or like foods that you tolerate even more, that we might have to have that conversation. But I haven't ever had to tell anyone to stray from kind of like what they prefer. But if you're asking me what I think in general would be best for most people, it would be plant-based with a little bit of animal protein in there too. And that can, most of the time should be lean. Although I like the 80-20 rule or the 90-10 rule as well, where you don't expect perfection from yourself all the time. You do the healthy things most of the time, and then it's not that 10 to 20% of indulging or kind of falling off your perfect plan that causes people to be chronically unhealthy or chronically overweight. It's what they do that 80 to 90% of the time. So plan and then, also you said what's the best diet? Also, how do you eat throughout the day? Getting up, eating breakfast is really important. And then eating something every 3 to 4 hours throughout the day, no more than 5 hours. So if you wake up at 6, let's say you're really good at eating breakfast, you do that. But if your lunch is not till 1 o'clock, that's a big gap, and that's not ideal for your metabolism. Your metabolism will slow down to make that breakfast last until lunch. So have a snack in between, a healthy snack balanced with some carbs and some protein. If there's a gap like that. And a lot of us, if we don't have one snack in the day, we'll have a gap like that either between breakfast and lunch or between lunch and dinner.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes me think of a whole other topic that we could talk about, the whole idea of intermittent fasting and whether or not that's good for you. But I know I have my own opinions on it. I think
Okay.
there are times that it might be beneficial, but I think like you do is you got to keep that metabolism going because it can be an
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, and I have people come to me like they want to lose weight and they're like, "Should I do intermittent fasting?" And I ask them how they eat, and it's like, "Well, I generally don't eat breakfast anyway, so this would be really good for me because and it's like, yeah, but I find that a lot of people who struggle with weight, they're already not eating breakfast. They're already not eating maybe till 10, 11 in the morning. Maybe they don't get hungry. They have their coffee, and then they don't get hungry till later, or maybe even till lunch. So you're already intermittent fasting and it's not working, obviously, if you're still not able to lose weight. So that's what I've seen and I've always taught. I used to be an athlete and I learned you need to fuel your body to keep your metabolism going. And so I kind of teach the opposite and I find that that works better. Again, with the caveat, I mean, if someone is doing it and it's working for them and they're getting the results, I'm not going to try to say that they're wrong. I think intermittent fasting works best for people who have a window of time that's a problem for them. So, let's say that there's a window of time that you do tend to snack or overeat, or choose the wrong foods. If you can slap the fasting over that time, it can really be helpful. So that might be like the evening. If there's a if you're an evening snacker and that's why you're overweight, that's one of your main problems, then having that, 12, 14-hour gap between dinner and breakfast could be really, really helpful for that person.
Mhm.
I would still say they could eat breakfast though.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've kind of pushed my children to make sure that they get a breakfast in the morning. I'm like, you need to fuel your brain for the day. So
Yeah,
it's really important for
right.
that. So that could be a whole nother conversation by itself.
Yeah.
You gave us one practical tip already. Do you have like one or two more that that you tend to find yourself giving more often than others, maybe?
Yeah. Are you thinking for like gut health or brain health or just general health?
Yeah, gut and brain health, kind of getting back to our original topic. I know we've kind of gotten off topic on
Mhm.
on a couple of
Yeah.
things, but it's always good to kind of get those other things in there too.
Yeah, and it's integrative, right? Our bodies are not just, it is hard to talk about just one part of the body because everything is connected, especially when we're talking about gut health. So it's like we're talking about gut bacteria and fiber, but that does affect your brain for all the
Hmm.
reasons that we've explained. I
Hmm.
would say also including omega-3 fats in the diet. So having foods like salmon, walnuts, flax seeds, chia seeds helps to support brain cell structure because the omega-3 fats are part of the cell wall of the brain cells. So that's extremely important for brain health. Also, just the antioxidant foods when we're talking about plant foods. So the different antioxidants are in brightly colored fruits and vegetables. Um, so as you asked for a practical tip, in the morning, I make a smoothie that has brightly colored fruits and vegetables, and I use a frozen mix, so it's very easy. So like kale and cherries and berries and things like that. And then you want to put some omega-3 fats in there. So it could be a tablespoon of flaxseed oil, it could be some chia seeds, it could be some ground flax seeds. Um, and then in that smoothie, I also include some avocado to give it some more healthy fat, which is good for the brain as well. Also, avocado has magnesium, which is good for the brain, um, and helps to regulate stress and neurotransmitter function. Um, you could put in some nuts if you wanted to. I don't put nuts in mine. I like avocado in the smoothie because it makes it really creamy, and you can make two ahead. You can make a full blender full and have half of it and save half for the next day, and it won't separate. So that's a little smoothie hack. But I love the idea of a daily smoothie, or at least like 3 to 4 times a week, maybe every other day, because it's a great way to just vehicle to pack in things that are healthy and get them down in a really palatable, delicious way that might be hard to get otherwise.
Yeah, good call. I like that. I used to do smoothies a lot. I do just the regular protein shake in the morning with my protein powder, but man, I do kind of miss that other stuff in there. I might have to go back to that.
Yeah, and it's like that little extra bit of time, right? But I've timed myself and it takes me about 6 minutes, maybe seven to do it. And it's like it's just getting in the habit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we can like not talk about like vagal tone. So the last tip I have is there's a lot we can do for vagal tone. So we talked about how important the gut-brain connection is, and I talk about this with all of my digestive health clients because, as I mentioned, this is underlying the root of everything. So what we can do to help retrain. We need to retrain the resting state, and it's just like training a muscle where we need practice that we do consistently. And so deep breathing is a really good really easy, it's free, it's accessible, and it's very effective to start to retrain those resting pathways. So you want to breathe in deeply into your belly. Okay, so you actually want to put your hand over your belly to make sure the belly's expanding. Otherwise, it's very easy to breathe into the chest in a shallow way. So breathe into the belly, breathe deeply into the belly, and make the out breath slow. So you could count in for 4, hold, and count out for 8. And that even just a few breaths every few hours makes a tremendous difference because it starts to train that resting state because our nervous system can be so trained into a stress state that even on a day there's no stress, we wake up and we go right into that stressed mode because it's just that's what your body does now. It's what your nervous system knows how to do. So the more we can train it to rest, the better our digestive system will function and the better that we will feel emotionally and the better our vagal tone will be, which also helps things like brain function, um, memory, a lot of different things. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Good tips. In looking at the time, we are probably about time to start wrapping up, but do you have any projects or upcoming events that you'd like to share with our listeners?
well, I do have a free guide. So we're talking about the diversity. I have a recipe and guide for how to make a veggie mash. And a veggie mash is a way to get diversity with a little bit of prep time, but then it lasts you for a few weeks. So basically, you grab one handful of 10 to 15 different vegetables, whatever you can get in a handful serving size, and then you blend them up in a food processor and you press them into an ice cube tray. And even if you just pop out one ice cube worth, which is a tablespoon, and pop it into a smoothie, mix it into a sauce, mix it into a soup, blend it into an entree, or just heat it up and put salt and pepper on it. That's giving you 10 to 15 different vegetables. So now you're leaps ahead of toward your 30 different plant foods per week. So that's a really good natural hack to help build up your microbiome. And it works for even sensitive people. And it works for picky eaters because I know my husband gets veggie mash and he doesn't even know it. It's in the smoothie. Just don't put any onions. That's my only tip if you're going to sneak it into the smoothie, but otherwise you won't taste it. So I'll send you the link so you can share that
Perfect.
with your audience to download.
Awesome. Yeah,
And
I
then you
have
can reach
some picky
me.
eaters at home too, so that would be perfect for them.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think we think like, oh, well, what would be the point of a tablespoon? But when we understand that we're feeding bacteria, it's valuable even to get that little bit in.
Mhm.
Um, and then I also have a website. You can find me at nutritionresolution.com, and I do one-on-one consultations for anyone who's looking for help with their gut health.
Awesome. And then I see you're on some of the Facebook or like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. So the social medias, I will include those links in the show notes as well. You're close
Perfect.
to me, so perfect on that. Any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners as we wrap up today?
Just take lifestyle change in steps and be patient. But don't expect, from yourself overnight change. That's just not realistic. And so pick you can always kind of think of one or two things that you'd like to improve. So just focus on those two things, those one or two things. And once you get those going, then you'll be able to think of another step you want to take and just kind of take one step at a time. And time flies, we say time flies when we're having fun, time flies in general. And so time will pass and you will make progress. So yeah. So we just want to keep that in mind when we're looking at adopting health habits for long-term wellness.
I love that. There was one point that I came up with a cheat sheet for my patients that was replacements for one thing after another. And I always advise them to take it one thing at a time. Don't try to overhaul your diet all at the same time because you're not going to be happy with it. Make little
Yeah.
changes. So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Alyssa. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You're very welcome. Thanks so much for having me. Okay. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this with others to help me continue on with my mission to help people live healthier, happier lives. Go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to see what I'm up to and get links to all the social medias there. See you next time.